Thank you so much, and what an opportunity it is for me to be here at our peak performance special occasion meeting, I guess you could say. I know it's going to be a little bit difficult, but I want you to imagine yourself in the forest. The forest is a little bit quieter than here, but I want you to picture yourself with a group of 15 friends, and you're trying to outrun a fast approaching forest fire. When one of the members of your group all of a sudden dashes out in front of you about 100 yards, pulls out his lighter, and lights the grass on fire. Then he starts waving to you and calling to you and say, come on, come on. How many of you would run towards him? How many would run the other direction? Well, that's exactly what Wagner Dodge found himself in the middle of August 5th, 1949. He and his team of smoke jumpers had landed in Man Gulch in Montana to fight a forest fire that was heading south. Within an hour, the fire blew up and went from the South Ravine to the North Ridge, where his team was at. Recognizing the dangerous situation his team was in, he ordered his men to drop their heavy equipment and to follow him up the hill, because he knew the only place where safety existed was up. At that point, Wagner took a sprint up the hill about 100 yards, and taking out a fire back starter, lit a fire ring of 25 feet. And it started to burn, and then he waved and he yelled and he tried to encourage the rest of the team to come and join him. But for some reason, they didn't follow him. In the face of approaching flames, the group panicked. Many of them went into the mode that every man to save himself, and they scattered, running helter-skelter up the hill. Two individuals followed a man that was trailing up the North Ridge, heading for a rock outcropping. No one followed Wagner. That tragedy of that day is what I'm here to tell you about. Because what happened next is actually what is recorded now is the standard for smoke jumper training. Wagner has created a fire ring of 25 feet in diameter. He covered his face and he laid down on the ground and he waited for the inevitable. The firestorm swept up through the valley, right on top of him, and with seconds, it passed right over him, leaving him uninjured. Unfortunately, 13 of the 15 other men died that day because they didn't follow him. My purpose today is to help you understand that you might be in similar situations, and that in his situation, Wagner, had he not only been just a designated leader, but a trusted leader, those 13 men might be alive today. So I want you to think about it for a second. Have you ever been thrown in a position, a role, an office, where you felt like you were Wagner? Well, maybe not so much that because of you, people died, or because they didn't follow you, they died. But you felt like you've been in a leadership role that no one's listening? That's management. You might not believe it, but you've heard the saying, it's lonely at the top. What are they talking about? Management. It's not leadership, because if you're talking about leadership, and in particular trusted leaders, they are rarely lonely. They are surrounded by individuals who love, trust, and work together as a team. Maybe I can explain a little bit more. In a presentation that I give on team leadership, I outline 4 different categories of leaders. There's the designated leader. You can probably imagine what that is. There is a situational leader. There's a leader that all of us hate, and that's the self-proclaimed leader. And then there's the trusted leader. A designated leader is typically one that you've been associated with as well. Your boss, your manager. They've been given a title of responsibility. But not every designated leader is a trusted leader. You can probably say, well, we've designated some government officials, but do you really trust your city councilman? A situational leader is a little bit different. It's a person that sees a need or an event and acts upon it. I'll use an example of a platoon that's on the front lines. They see an incoming attack. Are they going to stand around and say, well, Sergeant hasn't told us what to do yet. I hope he really figures out that that Scud missile's going to hit us soon. No, that's not what happens. Usually, someone that sees it first becomes the situational leader. They point to the sky and they say, incoming, everybody take cover. Well, there's also a matter of trust for a situational leader as well. You've probably heard the little story about the little boy that called wolf. Yeah, if you said, hey, incoming, a number of times and everybody piles into their foxholes and nothing happens, you do that a couple of times and you're laughing as the leader, you know, they're not going to believe you the next time that incoming is actually happening. That third leader category is the one that we hate. It's the self-proclaimed leader. And you can imagine the variety of categories here, but usually it's someone that has designated themselves as a leader for some reason, some credential, some inheritance, perhaps even their education. In the world, we call them sometimes dictators. Maybe that's one extreme, but in your work environment, it might be someone that uses their PhD as their badge of authority. And everything they say, it's like, well, I've got my PhD, and everybody else, they roll their eyes to the ceiling and go, oh, please. The last category is the trusted leader category. Now, this is a little bit different than those others because those other categories are actually leaders in some sense. But a trusted leader is the one that really has fellowship. Because leadership is about having followers. Yes, I could be a designated leader and some might follow me, but it's kind of like, well, he's got the best drum beat at this point, so maybe I'll follow him. But a trusted leader is different. They're the people in your group or your team that are kind of like the natural gravitation person, or the go-to guy on the team if you want something done. They have a camaraderie with the members of the team that help you be successful. In most cases, though, that trusted leader is not your designated leader. How many of you, in your own environment, the trusted leader is your designated leader? A couple. And that's usually the case. So what really is a trusted leader? What makes a person trusted? Maybe to answer that, we first say, how many here have experienced a great leader? What are some of the qualities that you've experienced? Chris?
They're vulnerable and transparent about what they're doing.
They're vulnerable and transparent. What else?
They take input from their team.
They listen to their team. They take input, yeah.
And actually, usually a lot of these teams make the decision, not themselves.
They act upon a collective group. Other attributes of a great leader.
They treat their team with respect, even if they don't let the team do what it wants to, because it can't for some reason. There's always respect.
There's always respect. Yes, that's true. All of these are great things about leadership, or that identify a great leader. But there's also something that's lacking in just that. If you think about someone you trust, how do you trust them, or why do you trust them?
They have my best interest at heart. Even though they have to do what's best for the group, I know what they choose is going to be my best interest as well.
How do they know what's your best interest?
They know me.
They know you. They have a relationship with you. Trusted leadership is about relationships. And relationships are built on trust. So if you want to know what leadership is really all about, it's all about trust. Let me close by sharing one of my ostentatious stories of a trusted leader of mine. At the age of 16, I had more things on my mind than merit badges and cars. Or merit badges and campouts. Typically it's girls and cars, right? 2 weeks before our 50-mile hike for our troop, our scoutmaster comes to me and says, "Rheid, I really want you to come on this hike with us." I really didn't. I didn't want to. Being a 16-year-old boy, and most of the boys going on this hike were 12 and 13. You know, 12 and 13-year-old boys are just weird to anybody, really. It's just that weird age group that their interactions around girls is just embarrassing. For some reason, I said yes. And I think it was because he said, "Rheid, I need you." So I went. A week before the hike, we had pack check. This is an essential thing that transpires for all Boy Scouts before they go on a hike, just to ensure that their mothers are okay with what they're taking. So I can tell you from that experience why it was so important that day. It was the previous hike. 2 boys. They went on a week hike with us down Paria Canyon, and all they brought for food was Pop-Tarts. I can tell you that on the 4th day, the Pop-Tart was actually very tasty because the boys got sick of it and they started to barter for real food. That day, we had spread out 10 boys, 2 leaders, and myself on Dave's lawn and started pulling all this stuff out of our packs. When all of a sudden, a little scrawny wisp of a boy came walking up with a pack on and these humongous hiking boots. Scott was barely 60 pounds buck naked. When he stepped on the scales, it was an amazing 117 pounds. Scott was only 11, but he would turn 12 on the hike. So Dave said, "Okay, you can come." I thought, this is a disaster waiting to happen. Our first day was a 12-mile hike, an elevation change of 2,100 feet, most of that coming in the last 3 to 4 miles of the hike. Pretty substantial. The Mashu Trail is an amazing backpack experience in the Sawtooth Nationals up in Idaho. As we started that trek from Bradley Scout Camp, things went well for about 3 hours. At that point, we started our climb. About 30 minutes into it, boys were starting to get tired. This was tough climbing. So Dave recommended that we stop and rest for a second. So we stopped, dumped our packs off, and then the slower hikers came up. Scott was the last to arrive. He dropped his pack, sat down on the ground, put his hands in his face, and you could tell he was just dejected. He was ready to quit. As the other younger boys ran around and did whatever they do in the woods, and that you can go everywhere with, Dave came over to me and he said, "Rheid, why don't you go over to Scott and ask him if you can take some of his stuff in your pack?" I kind of was caught back and I said, "What? I've got 63 pounds in my pack." But I didn't say that, because Dave had established a relationship with me for the past 5 years. We had not only done scouting together, we had gone camping as a family, we had gone hunting and fishing, and I had learned to trust Dave with all of my heart. So with his little nod of, "Go ahead, you can do it," I took the 10 steps over to Scott, and as Scott recognized me coming up to him, he kind of lifted his head, and that's when I saw the dirt stains from the tears down his face. And I realized that he was in trouble. I said, "Scott, it looks like you could use some help. Can I take some of your stuff for you?" And with kind of a shock, he lifted his head and he said, "You would do that?" And I said, "Sure, let's take a look and see what I can put in my pack." We dug through his pack and pulled out about 10 to 12 pounds of gear. And as I walked over to put it next to my pack to start packing it in, Dave stepped over next to me. He said, "Here, let me take a couple of those." And he put them in his pack. Something changed in me that day. Something happened from a leadership perspective. I might not have really been the leader in that setting, because Dave could have very easily gone over to Scott and said, "Hey Scott, let me help you. Let's take some of your weight." But instead, Dave encouraged me, because he saw that I had the potential to be a leader. Dave was the trusted leader. We have a great opportunity as this Peak Performance Club to actually establish and set a standard for leadership of clubs. Many of you here are already leaders in your own right. I've seen you in action. I've seen what you've done with other clubs, what you've done in the area, the division, and districts. And I can tell you that you are well on your way to become trusted leaders. I would like to encourage you that in the incoming months, that you take the opportunity to look around you and to be observant. Look for those people like Scott, or in this case like me, like Dave did with me, to give me the opportunity to become a leader. To reach out to them, create that trusted relationship, because that's so essential for leadership. While you're doing that, go a little bit beyond. Had Dave not come to me and said, "Hey Rheid, why don't you go help?" I probably wouldn't have. A 16-year-old boy still thinking about girls and cars. You can do that though. You're observant. You are leaders. So in the upcoming months, will you join me? Many eyes are on us, and we can become a standard for leadership. But more so, not just leaders, but trusted leaders. Thank you.